Beneath fading candlelight, a young woman faces the unthinkable, her fate traded like a debt, her freedom signed away to a man feared by all. Whispers turn to cruel laughter, echoing through the ruins of a once proud life, as duty forces her toward a destiny carved in shadows. Yet within her trembles a spark of defiance, a fragile hope that truth might outshine even the darkest reputation. Tonight, a secret stirs. A past returns to demand payment, and a choice rises between survival and the faint promise of desire. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from? And what do you love most about period romances? In the dim glow of a single candle, Olivia Harrington stood before the cracked mirror in her family's crumbling manor, her reflection a ghost of the girl she once was. At 19, her dark curls framed a face pale as porcelain, eyes wide with the terror of what dawn would bring. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp stone and faded lavender, remnants of a life slipping away like sand through her fingers. Her father, Lord Edmund Harrington, had gambled everything, the estate, the jewels, even her future, into the hands of creditors who cared nothing for mercy. Whispers had spread through the village like wildfire. The Harringtons were ruined, their name a jest at every tea table in Kent. But tonight, the whispers turned to cruel laughter. Olivia's hand trembled as she clutched the letter, its wax seal broken, the words searing into her soul. "You are to wed Earl Alexander Blackwood," it read, penned in her father's shaking hand. "It is the only way to save us from the debtor's prison. He has agreed to the terms, a marriage of convenience, your dowry his gain. Refuse, and we all perish. Alexander Blackwood, the most notorious earl in all of England. They called him the Shadow of Sussex, a man whose cruelty was legend. Widowed young, he ruled his vast estates with an iron fist, dismissing servants on whims, locking away his late wife's portrait as if her memory burned him. Tales swirled of guests vanishing from his halls, of midnight screams echoing from the towers of Blackwood Manor. And now she, Olivia, who had dreamed of love in the pages of forbidden novels, was sold to him like chattel at market. Tears blurred her vision as she sank to the floor, the cold wood biting through her thin nightgown. Outside, rain lashed the windows, mirroring the storm in her heart. How could her father do this, he who had once spun tales of knights and fair maidens by the fireside? The manor, once alive with laughter, now echoed with silence, broken only by her mother's muffled sobs from the next room. A knock shattered the quiet, sharp, insistent. "Miss Olivia?" It was Jenkins, the loyal butler, his voice a gravelly whisper through the door. "Your father bids you come to the drawing room. The Earl's emissary has arrived early." Her breath caught. Already. The carriage wheels had crunched on the gravel not an hour past. She rose, smoothing her gown with hands that refused to steady, and stepped into the corridor. Shadows danced from the flickering sconces, twisting like the fates closing in. Downstairs, the drawing-room door creaked open to reveal her family. Father, slumped in his armchair, face etched with shame. Mother, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. And there, by the hearth, a tall figure in a greatcoat, his face half hidden by the brim of his hat. The emissary, Mr. Thorne, a gaunt man with eyes like polished obsidian. "Miss Harrington," Thorne said, his voice smooth as oil, "the Earl sends his regards. He expects you at Blackwood Manor by week's end. The papers are prepared. Sign them, and your family's debts vanish like mist." Olivia's gaze flicked to the document on the table, her life reduced to ink and parchment. The room spun. Laughter bubbled up from the village below, faint through the storm, mocking her fall. They would toast her misfortune tomorrow, the gossips in their cozy parlours, while she faced the Earl's cold embrace. But in that moment, as thunder rolled, a spark ignited within her, a defiant fire. She would not break, not yet. She would enter the lion's den, but on her terms, unraveling the shadows that cloaked the man they called Cruel. As Thorn extended the quill, Olivia's fingers closed around it, her heart pounding a vow: survival, then salvation. For herself, for the love she still believed waited beyond the cruelty. The rain intensified, drumming a relentless rhythm, as if the heavens themselves wept for the girl about to vanish into the night. What secrets did Blackwood Manor hold? And could a heart as fierce as Olivia's thaw the ice around the Earl's own? Yet deeper still, in the recesses of her mind, a whisper stirred. Perhaps the legends lied. Perhaps the cruel Earl hungered for more than land and legacy. Perhaps he, too, was a prisoner of his past. She signed. The ink bled like blood. And with that stroke, her old life shattered, propelling her toward a destiny woven with danger, desire, and the unlikeliest of redemptions. If this tale grips you already, imagine the storms yet to come. Stay with me, for Olivia's journey has only begun. The carriage rattled along the muddy roads of Kent, the wheels churning through puddles left by the night's storm. Olivia sat rigid against the worn velvet cushions, her gloved hands clasped in her lap to hide their tremble. It had been 3 days since she signed the papers, 3 days of feverish packing and whispered farewells in the Harrington Manor's shadowed halls. Now the estate faded behind her like a half-remembered dream, swallowed by the rolling hills and hedgerows that bordered Sussex. The air inside the coach carried the faint must of old leather and the crisp bite of early autumn. Olivia wore her best travelling gown, a modest grey wool with high neckline and full skirts that rustled softly with each jolt. A bonnet of black silk tied beneath her chin shielded her from the chill wind sneaking through the window cracks. At 19, she felt every inch the lady she had been raised to be, yet the weight of her new reality pressed like an invisible yoke. Her companion, the same Mr. Thorn who had borne the Earl's missive, rode opposite her. He said little, his gaunt frame absorbed in a leather-bound ledger, quill scratching notes now and then. His presence unnerved her, a silent sentinel from Blackwood Manor, his obsidian eyes flicking up only to ensure she did not stray. "The Earl values punctuality, Miss Harrington," he had said upon departure, "and discretion." Discretion. The word echoed in her mind like a warning bell. The Harringtons had clung to the fringes of gentry, their manor a modest pile of stone overlooking the village of Ashford. Life there followed the rigid rhythms of Victorian society. Mornings spent in the drawing-room with embroidery or the pianoforte, afternoons on calls to neighbours whose fortunes had not yet crumbled. Olivia's mother, Lady Beatrice, had drilled etiquette into her since childhood. Curtsy to superiors, speak only when addressed, guard one's reputation as fiercely as a family crest. Yet ruin had eroded those walls. Father, Lord Edmund, once a jovial host at hunt balls, now haunted the estate like a spectre, his debts a chain around his neck. He had gambled at cards in London clubs, chasing illusions of wealth amid the smoke-filled rooms of gentlemen's society. "For the family!" he would mutter, but Olivia saw the hollowness in his eyes. Mother, with her silver-streaked hair pinned in elegant coils, had borne it with quiet dignity, her lace mitts hiding hands roughened by mending linens to make ends meet. Key figures in Olivia's world had shifted like sand. Jenkins, the butler, had pressed a small locket into her palm at dawn, a silver piece engraved with the Harrington rose, her grandmother's heirloom. "For strength, miss," he rasped, his loyalty a rare warmth in the cold farewell. Her younger brother, young Henry at 12, had clung to her skirts, his freckled face streaked with tears. "Don't let the Earl hurt you, Livy." The servants, too, had murmured prayers, their faces etched with pity for the daughter sold to save the house. As the carriage crested a hill, Blackwood Manor's silhouette emerged against the grey sky, a sprawling edifice of dark stone, its towers piercing the clouds like accusatory fingers. Ivy clung to the walls, and tall chimneys belched smoke from unseen fires. Legends painted it as a fortress of sorrow, where Earl Alexander Blackwood reigned supreme. At 35, he was a widower of infamous temper, his late wife, Lady Eleanor's death 5 years prior shrouded in whispers of madness or worse. Society shunned him at gatherings in Brighton or London, yet his wealth from coal mines and estates commanded respect and fear. Olivia's heart quickened. What awaited her? A marriage of convenience, Thorne had clarified. She would manage the household, bear an heir if required, and in return the Harrington debts dissolved. No love, no illusions, but in her chest a flicker of defiance burned. She had read Shelley and Byron in secret, dreaming of passions that defied class and cruelty. Could she navigate this new hierarchy, where servants bowed deeper and guests arrived with guarded smiles? The carriage slowed as they approached the iron gates, wrought with the Blackwood crest. A raven perched on a thorny branch. Thorne closed his ledger with a snap. "We arrive, miss. Compose yourself." Groomsmen in crisp livery, black coats with silver buttons, swung the gates open. The drive wound through manicured gardens, bare now in the season's turn, their fountains silent. Olivia peered out, noting the precision. Gravel raked smooth, statues of marble gods gazing sternly. No wildflowers here, no hint of softness. They halted before the grand entrance, where footmen waited with lanterns against the gathering dusk. Thorne alighted first, offering his hand. Olivia stepped down, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The door loomed, oak panels carved with ravens in flight. Inside, the hall unfolded in shadowed grandeur. Crystal chandeliers hung unlit, their prisms catching the flame from wall sconces. The air smelled of beeswax polish and aged wood, with an undercurrent of peat from a distant fire. A housekeeper, Mrs. Grimshaw, approached, a stout woman in starched cap and apron, her face lined like crumpled parchment. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Miss Harrington. The Earl is away on estate business. You will be shown to your rooms." Relief washed over Olivia, mingled with unease. Away? For how long? Mrs. Grimshaw led her up a sweeping staircase, portraits of stern ancestors lining the walls. Their eyes followed, painted in oils with lace cuffs and powdered wigs from centuries past. Her chamber overlooked the moors, furnished with a 4-poster bed draped in damask, a writing desk, and a wardrobe of mahogany. A fire crackled in the grate, chasing the chill. As a maid unpacked her trunks, simple muslins and bombazines, far humbler than the silks she imagined here, Olivia sank into a chair, exhaustion claiming her. Yet peace eluded. From the corridor came a low murmur, servants' voices hushed. She strained to listen. "It sold like a filly at Tattersall's," one whispered. Laughter followed, sharp and biting, then a hush. "Mind your tongue, she's to be the Countess." Olivia's cheeks burned. Even here, in this bastion of power, her misfortune preceded her. The first hint of the storm to come. As night fell, a knock sounded. Mrs. Grimshaw entered, bearing a tray with tea and scones. "The Earl returns tomorrow. Rest well, miss. The household awaits your arrival." Olivia nodded. But sleep brought dreams of ravens circling a crumbling manor. What whispers hid in these walls? And when the Earl appeared, would his cruelty eclipse the shadows, or reveal a man as trapped as she? The morning light filtered through heavy velvet curtains, casting long shadows across Olivia's chamber like fingers reaching for secrets. She rose early, the weight of the night clinging to her like dew on a cobweb. The manor stirred awake with the muffled clatter of silver in the kitchens below and the distant whinny of horses in the stables. Olivia dressed in a simple morning gown of dove-grey muslin, its high collar buttoned to her throat, the fabric whispering against her skin as she moved. No finery here. Her trunks held only the remnants of her old life, modest enough to remind her of the chasm she had crossed. Descending the grand staircase, she paused at a landing where a portrait caught her eye. It depicted a woman in Regency silks, her eyes hollow, a faint smile frozen in oil. Lady Eleanor, the late Countess. Whispers from the village painted her as fragile, broken by the Earl's unyielding nature. Olivia shivered, averting her gaze. The hall below buzzed with activity. Footmen polished brass newels, a maid swept the marble floor with brisk strokes. Mrs. Grimshaw appeared from a side door, her starched apron crackling like dry leaves. "Good morning, miss," the housekeeper said, her voice clipped yet not unkind. "Breakfast awaits in the small dining room. The Earl. He arrives at noon. Best to eat light. Matters will demand your full attention." Olivia nodded, her pulse quickening. Matters. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. She followed Mrs. Grimshaw through corridors lined with tapestries depicting hunts and heraldry, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and polished oak. The small dining room overlooked the gardens, its table set for one with fine china and silver that gleamed under the weak sun. As she sipped weak tea and nibbled toast, her mind raced. Allies. Here, in this fortress, who could she trust? Thorn lurked like a shadow, loyal only to his master. The servants seemed wary, their glances darting away when she entered a room. A clock chimed the hour from the hall, marking 10. Olivia wandered the lower floors, seeking the lay of the land. The library drew her, a vast chamber with shelves towering to the ceiling, ladders on rails for the daring. Volumes bound in leather promised escape. Novels by Austen, poetry by Keats. She trailed her fingers along a spine, dust motes dancing in the air. But solitude shattered with footsteps. "Curious already, Miss Harrington." A voice, smooth and edged with frost, cut the quiet. She whirled. In the doorway stood a woman of middle years, elegant in a bombazine gown of deep plum, her hair coiled severely at the nape. Miss Lydia Voss, the Earl's distant cousin and companion, Olivia recalled from Thorne's terse explanations. At 40, Miss Voss managed the household social calendar, a gatekeeper in lace and judgment. "I merely exploring," Olivia replied, straightening her posture. Etiquette demanded poise, even as her stomach twisted. Miss Voss's lips thinned into what might have been a smile, bold for a bride-to-be. "The Earl dislikes interlopers in his sanctum. Come, the drawing-room, we must prepare you." Prepare? The word chilled her. In the drawing-room, with its brocaded walls and a fire roaring in the grate, Miss Voss circled her like a dressmaker assessing flaws. "Your gown is adequate, but your posture, lift your chin. The Earl expects decorum, not dramatics. This alliance saves your family, but it binds you to Blackwood's rules. No whims, no scandals." Olivia's cheeks warmed. Alliance. It feels more like a sentence. Miss Voss paused, her grey eyes sharpening. Sentences can be served with grace, or they break you. Choose wisely. The clock struck noon. Carriage wheels crunched on gravel outside, heralding arrival. Olivia's breath caught as the door opened, admitting a gust of autumn wind. Thorne entered first, doffing his hat, followed by the man himself. Earl Alexander Blackwood filled the threshold, tall and broad-shouldered, his greatcoat shedding droplets from a sudden drizzle. At 35, he cut a figure of restrained power. Dark hair cropped short, a jaw set like carved granite, eyes the colour of storm clouds, piercing, unreadable. His face bore the mark of old scars, faint lines from some forgotten duel or accident, adding to the aura of danger. He shrugged off the coat, revealing a tailored waistcoat of charcoal wool over a crisp white shirt, breeches tucked into polished boots. No frills, no warmth. "Miss Harrington," he said, his voice deep, resonant, carrying the weight of command. He did not bow, merely inclined his head. "You arrive promptly. Good." Thorn melted into the background, Miss Voss curtsying low. Olivia rose, her knees unsteady, and managed a shallow dip. "My lord." He studied her, gaze travelling from her bonnet to her hem, clinical as a physician. "The papers are signed. The vicar awaits in the chapel tomorrow. A quiet ceremony, no guests, no fuss. Your role here begins immediately. Oversee the household, maintain the estate's dignity. In time, an heir. Fail in any, and the debts return to haunt your father." The words landed like blows. No courtship, no mercy. Olivia's defiance flickered. "And if I refuse this role?" His eyes narrowed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "Refuse? Your signature binds you. Society sees it as done. Walk away, and your family faces ruin. Your brother in the streets, your mother in shame. Is that your wish?" She swallowed, the room closing in. Allies? None yet. Miss Voss watched with veiled interest, Thorn impassive. The Earl's potential as antagonist loomed, his cruelty not in shouts, but in this cold calculus. "I accept," Olivia whispered, the decision forced like a key turning in a lock. But inwardly, rebellion stirred. She would play this game, learn its rules, find cracks in the facade. Alexander nodded once, turning to the fire. "See to it, Miss Voss. Miss Harrington, retire. Dawn comes early." As he stared into the flames, his back rigid, Olivia glimpsed a shadow cross his face. Regret or calculation? The rupture was complete. Her old world shattered, this new one a cage of velvet and iron. But what hidden fractures lay in the Earl's armor? And who among these watchful eyes might become her unlikely mentor? Outside, thunder rumbled anew, as if the sky itself protested the union forged in desperation. Tomorrow's vows would seal her fate. But Olivia vowed silently she would not yield without a fight. The chapel's stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across the stone floor, where Olivia stood in a gown of pale ivory silk, its lace cuffs trembling with her hands. The vicar droned through the vows, his voice a monotone echo in the vaulted space. Alexander faced her, his expression carved from ice, repeating the words without inflection. No flowers adorned the altar, no witnesses beyond Thorn and Miss Voss, who stood like sentinels at the rear. Rings exchanged, simple gold bands cold against her skin, sealed the bond. Countess Olivia Blackwood. The title rang hollow, a chain disguised as jewellery. Outside, the drizzle had cleared, leaving the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and pine. Alexander offered his arm as they emerged into the weak sunlight, but his touch was formal, distant. "The household awaits your introduction," he said, guiding her toward the waiting carriage. No words of tenderness, no shared glance. Yet in that brief contact, Olivia felt the tension in his frame, a coiled spring beneath the wool of his coat. Back at the manor, the staff assembled in the grand hall, maids in crisp aprons, footmen in livery, gardeners with soil-streaked boots. Mrs. Grimshaw stepped forward, her face a mask of efficiency. "Present yourselves to the new countess," she announced. Olivia nodded graciously, reciting greetings from her mother's lessons. "I am pleased to join this household." Murmurs rippled through the ranks, eyes appraising her modest attire against the Earl's shadowed grandeur. A young maid, Eliza, with freckles dusting her nose, curtsied low, "Welcome, milady." But from the back, a footman, a burly man named Hargrove, muttered just loud enough, "From Harrington rags to Blackwood riches, wonder how long she'll last." The words hung, a subtle barb. Olivia's cheeks flushed, but she held her chin high. Alexander's gaze flicked toward the offender, his voice cutting like a blade. "Mind your place, Hargrove, or find another." The footman paled, bowing hastily. It was the first defense, minimal yet pointed, a micro-gesture that stirred something in Olivia, not warmth but acknowledgement. He turned away, dismissing the assembly with a wave. The afternoon brought the first test, a semi-public call from local gentry. Miss Voss had arranged it swiftly, a tea in the drawing room to establish your position, as she put it. Invitations went to the neighbouring squire, Mr. Reginald Hawthorne, and his spinster sister, Miss Clara, pillars of Sussex society, who navigated the Earl's isolation with cautious curiosity. Olivia changed into her afternoon dress of soft blue bombazine, its bodice fitted with jet buttons, skirts gathered in precise pleats. A brooch, her grandmother's silver rose locket now pinned at her collar, caught the light, a talisman against the unknown. The Hawthornes arrived promptly, their carriage crunching on the gravel. Mr. Hawthorne, a ruddy-faced man of 50 with mutton chops and a waistcoat straining at the buttons, bowed over Olivia's hand. Countess Blackwood, a sudden union, but most fortuitous. His sister, sharp-eyed and powdered, simpered behind her fan. We heard whispers from Kent, the Harringtons' troubles, such a pity. They settled by the tea table, laden with scones, clotted cream, and Darjeeling steaming in porcelain cups. Miss Voss poured, her movements precise. Conversation flowed in eddies, the harvest yields, the upcoming hunt ball in Brighton. Olivia contributed politely, discussing the manor's gardens with feigned expertise, but the friction simmered. Miss Clara leaned in, her voice honeyed venom. One hears tales of Blackwood's temperament, and now a bride from fallen stock. Society can be unforgiving to those who rise too quickly, my dear. The humiliation landed softly, a class jab wrapped in concern. Olivia's fingers tightened on her cup, the brooch pressing into her skin like a reminder of roots. Alexander, who had entered silently to stand by the mantel, shifted. His eyes met hers across the room, a brief, stormy glance, holding longer than propriety allowed. No words, but in that shared silence, a thread of understanding wove between them. He cleared his throat. The Countess brings fresh perspective to Blackwood. Her family's legacy in Kent is respected, as is hers now. It was defence again, subtle, routing the barb without fanfare. Mr. Hawthorne chuckled awkwardly, steering to safer topics. Miss Clara's fan snapped shut, her smile thinning. As they departed, promising invitations, Olivia exhaled. The tea had measured her, rejection veiled as gossip, acceptance tentative. Yet Alexander's intervention lingered, a small advance in the chill between them. Alone in the drawing room afterward, Olivia approached the pianoforte. Its ebony keys dust-free under a silk cover. She lifted the lid, fingers tracing the ivories. Music had been her solace in the old manor, simple airs to soothe her mother's worries. Now it felt like defiance. She played a gentle melody, Chopin's nocturne whispering through the room. Footsteps approached. Alexander paused in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the light. "You play," he observed, voice neutral. "A little," she replied, not stopping. The notes bridged the space, her gaze lifting to his. For a moment, no walls. Then he nodded, turning away. "The brooch suits you." His words hung, the first personal note, a recognition of the symbolic object starting an arc she couldn't name, but shadows stirred. As evening fell, Thorne delivered a sealed note from the village. A society circular circulated among the gentry. The shadow weds a shadow. Earl Blackwood claims Harrington heiress in desperate pact. Whispers of her sale, her misfortune, inked for all to read. The consequence visible, rippling outward. Who had leaked it? Miss Voss's eyes darted away at dinner. Hargrove's grudge festered. Olivia clutched the brooch, resolve hardening. The new world integrated her, but at a cost. Alexander's glance across the table held a question now, ally or observer. And in the manor's depths, unseen eyes watched, plotting the next move. The tea's civility cracked, revealing the undercurrents that could drown her yet. The storm descended upon Blackwood Manor like a vengeful spectre, winds howling through the eaves and rain lashing the windows in relentless sheets. It had brewed all afternoon, darkening the sky to an unnatural twilight, trapping Olivia within the stone walls that now felt more like a sanctuary than a prison. She paced the drawing room, the brooch at her collar a small anchor against the growing unease. The pianoforte stood silent in the corner. Its keys a temptation she resisted. Alexander had retreated to his study after luncheon, his presence a distant thunder of its own. As evening deepened, thunder cracked overhead, shaking the chandeliers. Lightning illuminated the room in stark flashes, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Olivia moved to the window, pressing her palm against the cold pane. The gardens below blurred into chaos, trees bending under the gale. A sudden gust rattled the latch, and she stepped back, heart racing. Footsteps echoed from the hall, heavy, purposeful. The door swung open, admitting Alexander, his coat slick with rain, hair dishevelled from the fray. He had been inspecting the stables, he explained curtly, ensuring the horses were secured. Water dripped from his boots onto the Persian rug. "The bridge to the village is flooding," he said, voice low over the roar outside. "No one enters or leaves tonight. We are confined here. Together." Olivia nodded, the words settling like the storm's weight. Confined. The intimacy of it unnerved her, yet stirred a reluctant curiosity. He shrugged off his coat, hanging it by the fire, revealing the damp shirt clinging to his broad frame. For the first time, she saw vulnerability in the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the scar on his jaw more pronounced in the firelight. 35 years etched there, not just in age, but in burdens unspoken. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the settee. Not a command, but an invitation laced with weariness. She obeyed, smoothing her skirts, a simple evening gown of soft lavender wool, its modest neckline framed by lace. The fire crackled between them, a barrier and a bridge. Alexander poured brandy from a decanter, offering her a glass. She accepted, the liquid warming her throat as thunder rolled again. Silence stretched, broken only by the tempest. Olivia's fingers toyed with the brooch, its silver rose catching the flames. "This was my grandmother's," she ventured, voice soft. She wore it through scandals of her own, whispers of a forbidden love, a family torn by debts much like ours. It reminds me. Strength comes in small things. He watched her, glass paused midway to his lips. For a moment his stormy eyes softened, the ice thawing. "Small things," he murmured. "Eleanor's was a locket, much like yours. She filled it with sketches of our early days, before the mines claimed her health, before duty swallowed me whole." He set the glass down, leaning forward. The confession hung, raw and unexpected. Eleanor, the ghost in the portraits, now humanized by memory. Olivia's breath caught. "You loved her deeply then." Alexander's jaw tightened, gaze drifting to the fire. Love. It was a whirlwind courtship, sanctioned by society. She brought light to these halls, laughter where there had been only ledgers and legacies. But the coal dust, it seeped into her lungs year after year. "I pushed for more yields, more wealth, thinking it would secure us. Guilt festers, Miss Countess. It turns a man cold." He paused, the storm mirroring the pause in his words. "I was not always the shadow they paint." The revelation peeled back layers, humanizing the man before her. No longer just the cruel Earl, but a widower haunted by loss and regret. Olivia leaned closer, the brandy forgotten. "My father. He gambled our future away, chasing ghosts of grandeur. I signed those papers not from weakness, but to spare my mother the workhouse, my brother the streets. Duty binds us both, my lord. Perhaps it need not crush us." Their eyes met, a shared silence deeper than words. His hand brushed hers as he reached for the poker to stir the flames, a fleeting touch, electric yet restrained. No promises spoken, but in that gesture trust flickered to life, warming the chill between them. The temperature shifted from frost to fragile embers. He rose then, crossing to the pianoforte. "Play for me," he said, not a demand, but a quiet plea. Olivia hesitated, then settled on the stool, fingers finding the keys. She chose a gentle piece, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, its notes weaving through the storm like a lullaby. Alexander stood behind her, close enough to feel his warmth, yet not touching. The music anchored them, bearing souls in melody. As the final chord faded, he placed a hand on the instrument's edge, his voice rough. "Thank you. It has been years since these halls heard such peace." In that moment, a tacit vow formed. Allies in this gilded cage, confidants against the world's judgments. Olivia turned, their faces inches apart, breaths mingling. Hope bloomed, tentative and bright. But the storm's fury peaked with a deafening crack, lightning splitting a distant oak visible through the window. Alexander moved to secure the panes, and in his absence a knock sounded at the drawing-room door. Thorne entered, soaked and grim, bearing a sodden envelope sealed with unfamiliar wax. "From the village, my lord, smuggled across the ford by a rider. Urgent." Alexander broke the seal, his expression darkening as he read. Olivia peered over, glimpsing the scrawled words, accusations of forgery in the marriage papers, whispers of Harrington deceit, fueled by an anonymous hand. Miss Voss hovered in the doorway, her eyes darting away too quickly. The antagonist stirred, espionage from within, a message poised to unravel their fragile accord. The fire dimmed, the storm unrelenting. Trust had sparked, but shadows lengthened, threatening to extinguish it before dawn. What betrayal lurked in the manor's heart, and how deep did it cut? The morning after the storm broke with a deceptive calm, sunlight piercing the clouds like hesitant fingers through the manor's leaded panes. Olivia awoke in her chamber, the events of the night replaying in fragments. Alexander's confession by the fire, the melody of the pianoforte bridging their silences, the sodden envelope that had shattered the fragile peace. She dressed swiftly in a morning gown of soft cambric, its pale green fabric edged with modest lace, the silver rose brooch pinned securely at her collar. The air carried the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth, but dread coiled in her chest like smoke. Descending to the breakfast parlour, she found the table set for two, porridge steaming in bowls, fresh rolls beside pots of marmalade and tea. Alexander sat at the head, his broad frame rigid in a crisp shirt and waistcoat of navy wool, newspaper folded beside his plate. His stormy eyes lifted as she entered, holding hers for a beat longer than propriety allowed. "Countess," he greeted, voice steady but laced with the night's undercurrent. "The storm passed without greater harm. The bridge holds, for now." She took her seat, fingers brushing the brooch for reassurance. The note. From last night. What did it mean, my lord? Accusations of forgery. His jaw tightened, the scar along it catching the light. He pushed the envelope across the linen cloth, its contents now dry but no less venomous. An anonymous poison, likely from rivals in the village, claims the marriage papers bear false signatures, yours perhaps coerced under duress. If it spreads, it taints us both. Your family's debts resurface, and Blackwood's name becomes a laughingstock in London circles. Olivia scanned the scrawled lines, her stomach turning. The words dripped malice. "The Shadow's bride, bought with lies, investigate the Harrington seal." Who penned this? Thorne had vanished at dawn, dispatched to the village to trace the rider. Miss Voss entered then, her plum bombazine rustling, face composed as she poured tea. "Good morning. The post arrived early, more circulars, I'm afraid." She slid a sheaf of papers toward Olivia, her grey eyes flickering with something unreadable. The top sheet was a printed scandal sheet from nearby Lewis, circulated among the gentry. Earl Blackwood's sham union, sold maiden's desperate pact exposed. Details spilled out, her father's gambling, the sale of her hand, now twisted into claims of invalid vows. Whispers of bigamy, of Alexander's past entanglements with Eleanor's memory. Society's vultures had feasted overnight, the leek frontal and savage. Olivia's hands trembled, the teacup clattering against its saucer. This will ruin everything. How did they know? Alexander's fist clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. Sabotage! Someone close fed the tale. His gaze cut to Miss Voss, who busied herself with the silverware, but she met it coolly. Cousin, your ledgers track the estate's visitors. Any unfamiliar faces? Miss Voss's lips pursed. None that I recall, my lord. But the Harrington girl's arrival stirred talk, servants gossip, villagers listen. The barb landed, subtle yet pointed, her words framing Olivia as the intruder, the weak link. The attack escalated by midday. A carriage arrived unannounced, bearing Mr. Reginald Hawthorne and his sister Clara, their faces masks of feigned concern. They had come from the squire's estate, summoned by the circulars, demanding clarity on the union. In the drawing room, with its heavy drapes drawn against prying eyes, Hawthorne blustered, his mutton chops quivering. My lord, this forgery business, it's everywhere. The hunt ball invitations halt. Invitations to Brighton dry up. Your countess's reputation. It's a powder keg. Clara fanned herself vigorously, eyes on Olivia. Poor dear, dragged from Kent's ruins into this. But if the vows are false, what then? Scandal upon scandal. We stand with Blackwood, of course, but support wanes when trust fractures. Olivia stood by the mantel, the brooch feeling like a brand. Isolation crept in, the room's warmth turning stifling. Alexander paced, his presence a storm contained. The papers are legal. Thorne verifies it by evening. This is calumny, nothing more. But the damage seeped deep. Hawthorne's visit marked the loss, neighbours withdrawing, allies hesitating. Whispers reached the servants. Eliza avoided her gaze in the halls. Hargrove's mutters grew bolder. By afternoon, a messenger from London arrived. Creditors circling the Harrington estate anew, emboldened by the rumours, demanding repayment or seizure. Olivia's family teetered on the brink again, her sacrifice unravelling. The breaking point came in Alexander's study, a sanctum of oak panels and leather-bound tomes, where he confronted Miss Voss behind closed doors. Olivia lingered outside, drawn by raised voices. "You penned it, Lydia," Alexander accused, his tone thunderous. "Eleanor's death left you bitter, scheming for control of the estate. This sabotage, it's your hand." Miss Voss's laugh was sharp, devoid of mirth. "Bitter. You drove Eleanor to her grave with your obsessions, Alexander. Marrying this chit changes nothing. I'll expose every forgery, every debt, until Blackwood crumbles. Unless you set her aside." The words shattered the equilibrium. Alexander emerged, face ashen, spotting Olivia in the shadows. It's her. Lydia's manipulated the ledgers for years, siphoning funds, forging minor documents to build this web. She aimed to force my hand, now yours. He paused, the weight crushing. The marriage stands, but publicly. We must separate appearances. No joint events, no shared carriage. I'll handle the creditors alone. You retreat to your chambers. Isolation protects you, for now. Olivia's world tilted, the trust from the storm fracturing like glass. Separate? After last night? This is the point of no return, isn't it? You've chosen duty over us. His eyes, stormy and pained, held regret. Not chosen, forced. Lydia's ultimatum, divorce proceedings if we defy her publicly. One wrong step and your brother faces the streets. My mind seized. Go, Olivia, this breaks us. For now. She fled to her room, the door clicking shut like a tomb seal. The brooch mocked her now, its petals wilted in spirit, reputation wounded, alliance severed emotionally, the manor's walls closed tighter. No return to innocence. The sabotage had ignited a firestorm. As dusk fell, a final note slipped under her door, Lydia's hand, promising more revelations. Alexander's footsteps echoed away down the hall, withdrawing into solitude. What ultimatum would shatter them next, and could fractured trust ever mend? Days blurred into a haze of isolation within Blackwood Manor's echoing corridors, the weight of separation pressing like an unrelenting fog. Olivia spent her hours in the library, poring over forgotten volumes. The silver rose brooch, her constant companion. Alexander's absence stung, meals taken alone, his study door barred against her knocks. Lydia Voss prowled the halls with renewed vigour, her plum gowns a splash of venom amid the greys, issuing orders that sidelined Olivia further. Whispers among the servants grew bolder, the Countess confined, the Earl ensnared. Yet in the quiet, resolve hardened in Olivia's chest, a quiet forge turning despair to steel. It began with a misplaced key. Eliza, the freckled maid, had left a ring of iron keys on the side table during morning tea, access to the attics, forgotten in haste. Olivia's fingers closed around it, curiosity overriding caution. She slipped upstairs as noon bells tolled, the air growing dustier with each creaking step. The attic sprawled like a graveyard of relics, trunks shrouded in sheets, furniture draped in cobwebs. In the dim light filtering through a grimy skylight, she pried open a cedar chest marked with Eleanor's initials. Inside lay proofs that shattered illusions. A bundle of letters, yellowed and tied with faded ribbon, spilled forth. Correspondence between Alexander and his late wife, penned in the early years of their marriage. Words of affection leaped from the pages. My dearest Eleanor, the mines demand my soul, but you hold my heart. No coldness there, only a man torn by duty's cruel pull. Deeper still, a leather-bound ledger, its pages crammed with Lydia's precise script. Entries detailed siphoned funds, thousands diverted from coal revenues to hidden accounts, dated back to Eleanor's final illness. Forged receipts masked the theft, Lydia's hand evident in the altered signatures. A diary followed Eleanor's own, its final pages a testament. Lydia urges more yields, but Alexander resists for my sake. Her eyes hold greed, not grief. Beware her, my love. Olivia's breath hitched. Lydia, not Alexander. The true shadow. The cousin had manipulated debts, fueled rumours of the Earl's cruelty to isolate him, positioning herself as heir. Eleanor's death, hastened by poisoned tonics, hinted in a tucked-away note from a dismissed apothecary. Testimony in ink. Lydia's plot to claim Blackwood through blackmail, now extended to Olivia's sham marriage. Hope flickered, a peak amid the valley. Olivia clutched the diary, racing downstairs, heart pounding. She burst into Alexander's study unannounced, the door slamming against the oak panel. He rose from his desk, stormy eyes widening in surprise, then softening at the sight of her fire. "Olivia, what madness brings you here?" She thrust the ledger forward, words tumbling. "Not madness, truth. Lydia, she's the poison. These prove it. Thefts, forgeries, even Eleanor's end. Your coldness. It was guilt, shielding her memory from this viper's grasp. Duty chained you, not cruelty." He scanned the pages, face paling, then flushing with rage. The scar on his jaw throbbed as realization dawned. "Gods, I suspected pilfering, but this, she played me for a fool, using your arrival to strike." His hand covered hers on the diary, a contained touch, trust rebuilding, warmer than passion's blaze. For the first time, his gaze held no walls, only shared fury. "You've uncovered what I could not. Together we end this." The advance swelled hope. They pored over the evidence late into the night, shoulders brushing in the lamplight, voices low and urgent. Alexander revealed more, his own diaries, confirming Lydia's whispers had driven wedges, amplifying his isolation after Eleanor's grave. "I built walls to protect what remained," he admitted, voice rough. "But you've breached them." A promise in his eyes, trust forging alliance stronger than vows, yet danger valid swift. Dawn brought Lydia's response, a sealed missive slipped under the study door, her script elegant venom. "I know you've rummaged, little countess. Expose me, and the full truth spills. Your father's deeper debts, fabricated by my hand, but pinned on Blackwood. Society will devour you both." The threat loomed greater, indignation boiling in Olivia's veins. How dare this schemer twist lives, poison legacies? The public scorn would turn to outrage if they struck true. No more retreat. Olivia assumed agency, penning a letter that very afternoon, bold, unyielding. Addressed to the Sussex Gazette and key gentry like the Hawthorns, it detailed the sabotage without naming Lydia yet, framing it as a call for justice against unseen manipulators. "Blackwood Manor stands not on shadows, but on honor reclaimed," she wrote, her words a public pronunciamento. She dispatched Thorne, loyal now, swayed by the proofs, with copies to the village assembly hall, initiating a social stir. Servants overheard, loyalty shifting. Eliza nodded approval in the halls. The reapproximation deepened in the library that evening, Alexander drawing her aside. "Your letter, its bravery I lacked." His fingers grazed her arm, eliciting a shiver. Trust blooming, passion's embers banked but alive. They shared a quiet laugh over a passage in Eleanor's diary, a rare lightness piercing the tension. Hope peaked again, the couple united, but Lydia's shadow lengthened. A servant reported her frantic packing, whispers of fleeing to London contacts. Indignation crested as Olivia confronted her in the drawing room, Alexander at her side. Lydia's face twisted, denial crumbling under the ledger's weight. "You meddling girl! This estate was mine by right, Eleanor's weakness, Alexander's folly." Her venom spilled, admitting fragments, the tonics, the forgeries, all to seize control. The villain unmasked, public's fury would follow, outrage at her greed, her betrayal of kin. But Lydia sneered, eyes gleaming. "Fight me, and I summon the assembly tomorrow. A public inquest, your marriage dissected, debts exposed anew." The valley plunged deeper, threat escalating. Alexander's grip tightened on Olivia's hand. "Let it come. We face it together." As twilight fell, an invitation arrived by rider. The annual Sussex Gentry Assembly at Hawthorne Hall. A decisive gathering of whispers turned to reckonings. Lydia's doing or fate's call? The confrontation loomed, public and unforgiving. Would truth triumph or drag them into deeper abyss? Hawthorne Hall gleamed under the harvest moon, its lanterns casting golden pools across the gravel drive, where carriages converged like ships in a fleet. Olivia stepped down from the Blackwood landau, her gloved hand resting lightly on Alexander's arm. The assembly buzzed with anticipation. The annual gathering of Sussex gentry, a whirlwind of silk gowns and whispered alliances, now charged with the storm of scandal. She wore a gown of midnight blue taffeta, its bodice embroidered with subtle silver threads, skirts flowing in controlled elegance that belied the fire in her veins. The silver rose brooch gleamed at her throat, no longer a talisman of loss, but a badge of reclaimed truth. Alexander, resplendent in black tailcoat and crisp white cravat, his scar a faint silver line in the torchlight, squeezed her arm gently. "We face them as one," he murmured, his voice a low rumble amid the laughter and clinking glasses spilling from the doors. No more separation. The proofs from the attic had forged their pact anew. Thorne trailed behind, clutching a leather portfolio heavy with evidence, his gaunt face set in grim resolve. Lydia Voss had accepted the invitation with feigned poise. her carriage arriving moments before, but Olivia glimpsed the calculation in her grey eyes as she swept inside. The grand ballroom unfolded in splendour, crystal chandeliers dripping light onto polished parquet, walls lined with portraits of stern ancestors. Quadrilles swirled in colourful eddies, violins weaving through the air, thick with perfume and intrigue. Mr. Reginald Hawthorne greeted them at the threshold, his mutton chops twitching with unease. Earl Blackwood, Countess. A full house tonight. The circulars. They've stirred the pot. His sister Clara hovered nearby, fan fluttering like a trapped bird, her gaze darting between Olivia and Lydia, who mingled near the punch bowl, her plum silk gown a stark contrast to the pastel whirl. Olivia nodded graciously, her chin lifted. "We come to clear the air, Mr. Hawthorne. Truth has a way of dancing its own steps." Alexander's hand brushed hers, a contained gesture, trust's quiet anchor. They moved into the fray, greetings exchanged with cautious smiles from squires and their wives, the air humming with sidelong glances. Whispers followed, the forged marriage, the Harrington debts, Lydia's veiled hints in pre-assembly notes painting Olivia as a schemer, Alexander as a tyrant. The sabotage struck at the evening's heart, just as the master of ceremonies announced toasts. Lydia ascended the small dais by the orchestra, her voice carrying like a clarion over the hush. "Ladies and gentlemen, a word on recent misfortunes." She unfurled a dossier, papers rustling like dry leaves, fake letters purportedly from Thorne, claiming Alexander's signatures on the marriage contract were altered, Olivia's hand coerced. A bought witness, Hargrove the footman, stepped forward from the shadows, his burly frame sweating under the lights. I saw the Earl force her pen. Debts or no, it's a sham. And the Countess. She knew of the forgeries from the start. Harrington blood runs crooked. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Clara Hawthorne clutched her pearls. Hawthorne's face reddened. Lydia's eyes locked on Olivia, triumph gleaming. This union crumbles under lies. Blackwood's legacy, tainted forever. Who among you will stand with shadows? The room tilted toward chaos, murmurs swelling to a roar, couples drawing back as if plague tainted. Olivia's heart thundered, but Alexander's grip steadied her. This was the moral crux. Yield to the venom, or claim their truth before the world that had mocked her fall. She stepped forward, voice clear and unyielding. "Enough of these fabrications." The orchestra fell silent, all eyes turning. Alexander nodded, signalling Thorne, who mounted the dais with the portfolio. "These," Olivia declared, drawing the ledger and Eleanor's diary from the case, "expose the true architect of deceit." She opened the ledger, pages flipping to Lydia's incriminating script. Diverted funds, forged receipts, tonics laced with subtle poisons that hastened Eleanor's decline. Gasps echoed anew as Thorne read aloud. Dates, amounts, Lydia's own admissions in the margins. Not my husband's cruelty, but this woman's greed stole a life and sought to steal a legacy. Lydia paled, lunging for the papers, but Alexander blocked her path, his presence a wall of restrained fury. "You poisoned my wife, Lydia, siphoned our wealth, twisted scandals to isolate me. And now, this final ploy, to shatter what Olivia and I have built from duty into something real." His voice cracked on the last words. A raw admission that silenced the room. The counterattack unfolded with precision. Eliza, the freckled maid, emerged from the servants' entrance, summoned as key witness, her loyalty won by Olivia's quiet kindness. "I saw Miss Voss mix the tonics, my lord, hid the vials in her chamber, and Hargrove, she paid him silver to lie tonight." The footman blanched, stumbling back as Hawthorne seized his arm. "Treason in our midst." The community shifted like a tide turning. Murmurs became exclamations of outrage against Lydia, the viper in their fold. Clara's fan dropped, her eyes wide with horror. Eleanor's death? Murder? Squires nodded. Wives whispering fervent support. Hawthorne boomed, "This assembly condemns such treachery. Blackwood stands vindicated. The Countess a heroine unmasked." Euphoria crested as Lydia crumpled, dossiers scattering like confetti of defeat. Guards from Hawthorne Hall escorted her away, her screams of denial fading into the night. Applause thundered, hands clapping Olivia's. Alexander's arm around her waist in full view. A public affirmation. From humiliated bride to respected countess, the reframing complete. Laughter bubbled now, genuine, as couples toasted their union, the scandal's shadow lifting like mist at dawn. In the quiet aftermath, as the orchestra struck up a waltz, Alexander drew Olivia to the floor. Their steps synced, bodies close in the swirl. His breath warm against her ear. "You chose truth over silence. We both did." No grand vows, but in his eyes, a tacit commitment, intimate, unbreakable, the storm's silence yielding to shared horizon. The night pulsed with victory's glow, but whispers lingered. What remnants of Lydia's web might yet unravel in the days ahead. The first light of dawn crept through the tall windows of Hawthorne Hall, painting the ballroom in soft golds that chased away the night's shadows. Olivia leaned against a marble pillar, her midnight blue gown slightly rumpled from the waltz. The silver rose brooch still pinned firmly at her throat. The assembly had dispersed in waves of murmured farewells and fervent handshakes, the gentry's outrage at Lydia's treachery turning to admiration for the couple who had unmasked it. Alexander stood beside her, his tailcoat unbuttoned, the tension in his broad shoulders easing for the first time in weeks. Thorne hovered nearby, the portfolio tucked under his arm like a trophy of vindication. As the last carriage rattled away down the drive, Mr. Hawthorne approached, his ruddy face flushed with purpose. "Earl Blackwood, Countess. This business demands swift justice. I've summoned the magistrate from Lewis. Lydia Voss will face charges by noon. Theft, forgery, and, worse, if the apothecary's testimony holds." His voice dropped grave. Eleanor's end was no accident. Poison in those tonics. The law will see her exiled, her claims stripped. No inheritance, no return to Sussex society. Alexander nodded, his stormy eyes steady. "Let it be done. Blackwood's ledgers will aid the case, every diverted pound accounted for." Lydia's consequence crystallized, banishment to a distant cottage on meager allowance, her prestige shattered like the dossier she had wielded. Whispers already spread of her fall, the gentry's doors barred forever. Hargrove, the bought witness, faced the stocks for perjury, his grudge reduced to public shame. Olivia's family ties mended next. A messenger arrived at first light, bearing a letter from her father, Lord Edmund, penned in Kent. "My dearest Olivia," it read, "news of your triumph reaches us on swift wings. The creditors withdraw, shamed by the truth. Your mother weeps with joy. Henry speaks of you as a knight from his storybooks. We owe you everything, our home secured, our name restored." Alexander had dispatched funds from the reclaimed mines, dissolving the debts that had sold her fate. No more chains. The Harrington stood on firmer ground, her sacrifice transformed into salvation. Back at Blackwood Manor by midday, the household stirred with renewed vigor. Servants who had once whispered now bustled with loyalty. Eliza promoted to headmaid, her freckles bright with pride as she oversaw the polishing of silver. Mrs. Grimshaw, ever efficient, nodded approval at Olivia's quiet commands. Even Thorne, the gaunt emissary, softened, murmuring, "You've brought light to these halls, milady." Neutrals like the gardeners repositioned, their wary glances replaced by respectful bows. Allies rewarded, Jenkins, summoned from Kent, arrived to serve as steward, his gravelly voice a comforting echo of home. In the sunlit drawing room, Alexander and Olivia faced each other across the tea table, the air free of storm's chill. No longer bound by convenience, their union reshaped by choice. He drew a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a new ring, simple gold etched with intertwined roses and ravens, unburdened by Eleanor's shadow. "This is ours," he said, voice deep and warm. "No debts, no duties imposed. Marry me again, Olivia, as equals, for the legacy we build, not the one we inherit." Her heart swelled, tears pricking her eyes. She extended her hand, the band slipping onto her finger beside the wedding ring, a ritual renewed, pure and voluntary. "Yes, Alexander, as equals." Their fingers intertwined, the touch lingering, a seal of alliance forged in fire. Transformation shone in them both. Olivia's voice, once hesitant, now carried leadership's grace as she proposed changes. The East Wing, long shuttered, reborn as a lending library for village children, stocked with volumes from the manor's shelves, Austen, Shelley, tales of resilience. Alexander, his compassion awakened, pledged funds from the mines to a school in Ashford, honouring her Harrington roots. "No more shadows," he vowed. "We lead with open hands." His scar seemed less a mark of cruelty, more a badge of survival, his commands tempered by her influence. By evening, they walked the gardens, the air crisp with autumn's promise. Paths once rigid now bloomed with wildflowers Olivia had ordered planted, defiant bursts of colour against the manicured hedges. At the fountain's edge, where statues gazed serenely, Alexander drew her close. No grand gestures, but his lips met hers in a kiss born of love, soft and profound, the world fading to their shared breath. Horizons stretched before them, mines reformed for fair labour, estates thriving under joint stewardship, a future woven with purpose. Yet a soft hook lingered. As they returned to the manor, a letter awaited on the silver tray, sealed with the hawthorn crest. "An invitation to London," Alexander read aloud, "for the Queen's review of noble reforms. Your library, our school, they wish to honour such works." Olivia smiled, possibilities unfolding like the path ahead. In that moment, Blackwood Manor stood renewed, its towers no longer accusatory, but beacons. Legacy in action, children would read by lamplight, families spared the workhouse's grasp. Olivia and Alexander, once prisoners of fate, now architects of hope, their love a quiet triumph, enduring beyond the scandals that had tested it. 5 years had woven their gentle threads through the tapestry of Blackwood Manor, transforming its stern towers into a haven of quiet warmth. The autumn sun slanted through the library windows, gilding the rows of bookshelves that now brimmed with fresh volumes, donations from London scholars, inspired by Olivia's vision. At 24, she moved with the grace of a woman who had claimed her world, her dark curls pinned loosely, a simple gown of sage-green wool hugging her frame. The silver rose brooch still graced her collar, but beside it hung a locket etched with ravens and roses, a symbol of the life rebuilt. Alexander stood by the hearth, his 39 years, etching deeper lines around his stormy eyes, yet softening the scar on his jaw into a mark of endurance rather than threat. His broad shoulders filled the tailored coat of charcoal grey, and as he turned, a rare smile broke the remnants of his reserve. In his arms, he cradled their daughter, little Eleanor, named for the lost countess but alive with her mother's fire. At 3, the child clutched a picture book, her chubby fingers tracing illustrations of knights and gardens, her laughter a melody that echoed through halls once silent with sorrow. "See, Papa, the lady saves the castle," Eleanor declared, her voice piping clear, dark curls bouncing as she pointed. Alexander chuckled, a deep rumble that still surprised Olivia with its tenderness. "Just like your mother did for ours." Olivia crossed to them, her hand brushing his arm, a touch grown familiar, intimate in its ease. 5 years since the assembly at Hawthorne Hall, where truth had triumphed over Lydia's venom. Their second wedding, a modest affair in the manor's chapel with family and loyal friends, had sealed what the first had only sketched. Love had bloomed from duty's ashes, tested by time's steady hand. No grand passions, but a quiet flame. Shared glances over breakfast, walks through the wildflower garden she had coaxed from the rigid lawns, nights by the fire where confessions flowed like the brandy they sipped. The changes rippled outward, a legacy etched in stone and soil. The East Wing Library now served the village, its doors open 3 days a week to children from Ashford and beyond. Olivia oversaw it personally, reading tales to wide-eyed boys and girls huddled on cushions, their faces lit by oil lamps. "Knowledge is no one's prisoner," she would say, echoing the freedom she had seized. Alexander's school in Kent flourished too, funded by reformed minds where workers earned fair wages, no longer coughing coal dust into early graves. The Earl, who once ruled with iron, now led with equity, his speeches at gentry assemblies drawing nods of respect rather than whispers of fear. Her family had mended under that shadow lifted. Lord Edmund, chastened by ruin's edge, managed the Harrington estate with newfound caution, his jovial tales now laced with wisdom. Lady Beatrice visited often, her silver hair a crown of resilience, doting on Eleanor with lace-trimmed bonnets and stories of Olivia's girlhood. Young Henry, now 17, apprenticed under Alexander's steward Jenkins, his freckled face serious as he learned ledgers and lands. "You've given us a second chance, Livy," he had said on his last visit, hugging her fiercely. No prices paid in shadows. Redemption had come full circle, yet not all threads tied neatly. Lydia Voss lingered as a cautionary echo, her exile in a remote Welsh cottage a barren fate. Stripped of claims, she scraped by on a pittance from distant kin, her schemes crumbling like the forged papers she once wielded. Word reached them sporadically, a letter from the magistrate, reporting her descent into isolation, health failing from the poisons she had wielded on others. No remorse in her final missive, only bitterness. "You stole my inheritance." Alexander burned it unread, his arm around Olivia. "She paid for her greed. We build beyond it." Their son, William, toddled in from the garden then, 4 years old and sturdy as his father, dirt smudging his cheeks from chasing butterflies among the wildflowers. Eliza, now housekeeper with a family of her own, followed, wiping her hands on her apron. "The lad's a whirlwind, milady, just like you at his age, from what Jenkins tells." Olivia scooped him up, kissing his forehead, the scent of earth and childhood filling her. Alexander set Eleanor down, drawing his family close. The library, once a sanctum of solitude, now hummed with life. Books open on tables, a cradle rocking gently in the corner. Nostalgia tugged at Olivia's heart, a sweet ache for the girl who had arrived in terror, sold like chattel to the cruel Earl. That girl had unearthed truths, toppled villains, and found not just survival, but a love that deepened with seasons. Alexander's hand found hers, fingers lacing tight. "Do you ever wonder," he murmured, voice low as the child's laughter faded into play, "what path we might have walked without that storm?" She leaned into him, the weight of years a comfort. "Every day, but this is the horizon we chose." His lips brushed her temple, a kiss soft as falling leaves, sealing the moment. Outside the moors stretched golden, the manor no longer a cage, but a cornerstone. As evening fell, they gathered by the fire, children nestled between them, tales unfolding once more. Love had resisted time's trials, blooming resilient. Blackwood Manor stood as testament, from misfortune's laughter to a legacy of light, where hearts once shadowed now shone enduring. As the final embers of the hearth-fire glowed in Blackwood Manor's grand library, Olivia closed the book on her lap, the children's laughter fading into the hush of evening. 5 years had etched their story into the very stones of the estate, turning whispers of misfortune into echoes of triumph. Alexander's hand rested warm on her shoulder, a silent vow renewed with every shared glance. Their family, Eleanor and William, with their boundless energy, had woven joy into the threads of duty and redemption. The library, once a shadowed retreat, now pulsed with life, its shelves a bridge to futures unbound by the past's cruel chains. But beyond these walls, the tale of Olivia Harrington and Earl Alexander Blackwood rippled outward, a testament to the unyielding spirit that defies even the darkest fates. From the ruins of a souled destiny, they had forged a legacy of light, schools rising in forgotten villages, libraries opening doors to the dreams of the overlooked, minds transformed from pits of despair to engines of fair prosperity. Lydia's shadow had dissolved into obscurity, her greed a cautionary footnote in Sussex chronicles. The gentry, once quick to laugh at Olivia's fall, now raised toasts to her grace, her courage the stuff of drawing-room legends. What lessons linger in this winding path? First, that cruelty often masks a deeper wound. Alexander's ice had thawed not through force, but through the gentle persistence of truth and trust. Duty, when chosen freely, becomes the strongest bond, turning strangers into soul's companions. And resilience, it blooms in the smallest acts, a brooch clutched in trembling hands, a melody played against the storm, a voice raised in the face of deceit. No misfortune is final if the heart refuses to yield. Society's judgments may sting like autumn rain, but they cannot drown a spirit determined to rise. Imagine, dear listener, the power in your own hands. Like Olivia, you carry the spark to unravel shadows, to claim a horizon brighter than the one handed to you. Let this story stir your soul, reminding you that love, true and tested, conquers not just hearts, but empires of doubt. If Olivia's journey moved you, the defiance in her step, the quiet fire that melted the Earl's resolve, share your thoughts below. What moment gripped you most? The storm's confession? The assembly's turning tide? Drop a comment. Let us weave this tale into a community of stories that inspire. And for those who journeyed to this very end, write the word Raven in the comments. It signals you've conquered the shadows with Olivia, and it'll help spread this narrative to others seeking the same cathartic thrill. Your voice amplifies the light. While you're here, glance at the cards. I've curated more epochs of passion and peril, from Regency whispers to Tudor tempests. Click through. Let the next adventure pull you in. Thank you for sharing this fireside hour. Until the next tale unfolds, may your own story brim with triumphs yet to come.